All right, the REY movie. Let's talk about the REY movie. I think I made the video maybe a year ago, where I said that I didn't think this movie was ever happening. Right? I think I said that. And now there's reports coming out that that may indeed become a reality. So, in case you're not caught up on the news, a couple years ago or maybe it was last year, at Star Wars Celebration, they announced three projects, theatrical Star Wars projects. One was a James Mangold Jedi origin story, a prequel like hundreds and hundreds of years before even the High Republic, going all the way back to the first Jedi. There was a story by Dave Filoni that was going to be, from what I understood, kind of a culmination of all of the Disney Plus shows like Ahsoka, Mandalorian, Boba Fett, all in one big movie. Probably a big battle with Thrawn is what everybody was guessing, like the finale of that storyline. And then the last one was a REY movie that takes place after Episode 9. It wasn't called Episode 10, but they did discuss that they were looking for a script and that they would probably make that one first. Well, now the report, it's actually kind of funny. Now the report is coming out that it might not happen. Now, when I made the video, I argued the point that I don't think anybody wanted a REY movie. And when I argue this point, I'm not arguing the point from a fan who is upset or angry at the prequel, at the sequel trilogy, even though that's a big reason as to why a lot of fans don't like it. Nor am I not taking into account the fans that like REY. That's not the angle that I was going for. It feels like the REY movie, quote unquote, would have been sort of after her story ended, because there's no question, well, maybe there is a question, but it feels like at the end of Episode 9, there wasn't much left for REY to do except train new Jedi. So if the story was going to be her as a Jedi Master opening up a new Jedi Academy, maybe there'd be some interest from people who like REY. However, when I looked at some comments, a lot of the people who liked Last Jedi, a lot of the people who, and yes, before you say anything, a lot of people like Last Jedi. I was not one of them. Many YouTubers didn't like it, but I saw a lot of folks, including friends of my own, that like Last Jedi. And a lot of them liked this whole like REY is a nobody angle they were going for in Last Jedi. But then in Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, they went back on that and revealed she was a Palpatine. And so the fans that liked the REY nobody angle felt cheated when she became a Palpatine. And ironically enough, the fans who didn't like the REY nobody angle also didn't like the Rise of Skywalker, because it, making her a Palpatine this late with no foreshadowing at all, and bringing back Palpatine was done in such a sloppy way, and the movie had tons of problems. My argument was that I didn't feel like any of the sequel trilogy characters were popular enough to spin off. I think you could have had it with with Poe and Finn. I've made that mistake before. After Force Awakens, I think you could have done a story with those characters later on as a side story. But by the time Rise of Skywalker came out, who in that movie really got over? Like, who in that movie really became a fan favorite? And the answer is nobody, including the people who liked Last Jedi. And so I felt like the issue with REY is that even if you're one of those people who is okay with Disney making more Star Wars films, I still feel like REY, and this is not Daisy Ridley's fault. I want to make that very clear. The actress had nothing to do with this. She did the best she could with what she was given. And she actually is a good actress. She played REY well. No argument there. It's the fact that REY represented the sequel trilogy, and to a lot of people, the sequel trilogy and what it did killed Star Wars for them, or killed that little fan in their heart. That is a factual statement. I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people look at REY and they think this character represents Disney Star Wars spitting in our face. Even though the character itself doesn't necessarily do that in the films, although in some, the writing certainly does, and neither does Daisy Ridley. She is a character that Whether you want to go with the Kathleen Kennedy is a feminist angle, or whether you want to go with the bad writing, or the fact that the directors never even collaborated, whatever angle you want to take with this, Rey represents how sloppy the sequel trilogy is, unarguably, right? So I think having a Rey movie would just remind people of, oh yeah, the sequel trilogy. Whereas there was a time, maybe not now, but there was a time when fans were starting to slowly but surely give Star Wars another chance. Specifically with the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian. I think had they stuck their guns and produced good quality television like The Mandalorian's first 2 seasons, I'm not saying the sequel trilogy would have ever been erased or decanonized. That wasn't going to happen, no matter how many fake YouTubers said so. No. Or well, fake news YouTubers. They were never going to do that because it's Carrie Fisher's final project and because Disney has way too big of an ego to ever admit fault. Instead, they were going to sort of ignore the sequel trilogy and just write another set of stories after Return of the Jedi, but before Force Awakens, which became the Mandalorian and Ahsoka Filoni, Disney Plus universe, right? Having a Rey movie come out would just bring fans back to that time period and say, oh yeah, Rey, I really liked her in Force Awakens, but they messed her up in the last 2, which would be my perspective. Or them saying, great, the story of the Mary Sue. Like, everyone's got their own opinion on this, but Rey did not win over that many hearts. And it wasn't Daisy Ridley's fault. Again, it was the writing. It was the writing and the sloppy production. So I thought from the very beginning this was a foolish move. And I remember I had a conversation with Josh of Den of Nerds privately, and we both talked about how weird it was. And we both talked about how this wasn't the right move for the future of Star Wars. It was such a tone-deaf move. We're like, did they not understand that the sequel trilogy just didn't get over? Was it just, well, they all made $1 billion, so it's okay? But it's that, that Kathleen Kennedy stubbornness, man. I'm not going to spend this video bashing Kathleen Kennedy because you guys know there's probably hundreds of videos bashing her, and I've done a few myself. And it's not even a personal thing, it's just she's not a very good leader. So the decision to make a Rey movie was such a perplexing decision. Such a strange decision, right? Now the talk is it may get postponed or even canceled. Just cancel it. Just cancel it. What blows my mind about Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm, what blows my mind, I don't know if Kathleen Kennedy has some kind of dirt on Bob Iger or something, but has there ever been a producer, an executive producer, in the history of Hollywood? And I know some of you guys know your history and some of you guys don't, and that's okay. I'm not asking you to know everything, but how do you have a producer behind a franchise as big as Star Wars, which was the biggest film franchise ever before the MCU took its place? How do you have a producer lose so many directors and writers since the beginning? Every Star Wars project had some kind of issue. Even Force Awakens. Remember, Michael Arndt wrote the original screenplay for Force Awakens, and that got taken out for JJ and Lawrence Kasdan. At the time, I thought it was a good move, even though I do respect Michael Arndt. Then, of course, you've got, Rian Johnson stuck around, but then for Episode 9, it was Colin Trevorrow. He got replaced. Ron Howard replaced Lord and Miller. There was the thing with the Game of Thrones guys that never happened. Rogue Squadron. Like, there are so many projects that get announced and then just don't happen. And how many times have me and other people on YouTube said, listen, just don't announce anything until you know for sure it's happening. Do not announce a movie or a project until you have a script. Until you have a script and a director who is committed to the project, don't announce it. But it's like they never learn. And it's fucked up because Kathleen Kennedy, in her production history in the past, has helped produce some great films. There's no argument there. But for Star Wars, it's just been like, even put aside all the political stuff for just a minute. How do you lose directors and writers like this? Like, what is really going on here? And we know that Phil Lord and Chris Miller are talented. We know that. We know Colin Trevorrow, his script leaked for Duel of the Fates. We know that. So it's such a bizarre situation such a bizarre situation. This Rey movie should just not happen. I think that the sequel trilogy characters, even Kylo Ren, who was the saving grace of those movies, I think the sequel trilogy characters need to be put on ice. Let's not go back to them. Let's not even reference those films because they're too polarizing. They cause too many issues. Maybe do comics and stuff like that based on that era, which they've already done, and novels. But I would leave that era alone when it comes to movies. So I do think the Rey movie needs to be canceled if it's not fully canceled already. And it's yet another project that's just embarrassing. I just don't understand how Lucasfilm, and maybe they are behind the scenes, how are you not embarrassed to have all these projects go nowhere? Like, that's a bad look. That's a genuine bad look for your studio. So, with that being said, what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. I hope the movie gets canceled. I don't care who they bring in. Just ignore that era. Focus on post-Jedi, before Force Awakens. Focus on, hell, you could even, this is going to sound weird because The Acolyte was trash, but you could even do a High Republic movie if you want, if you have a good writer. There's things they could do. Just ignore that era because all it does is cause infighting among fans. It just focus on something else, something, maybe a separate story altogether. Just stay away from it because it's not a good idea.